Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to Market Psychology 101, where we look for value in the markets when there's fear and are cautious when there's greed. On today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the crypto fear and greed indicator and seeing where the price is in relation to greed and fear. Whether this tends to be more of a leading indicator, a lagging indicator, and if there's anything historically that we can take away from that when applying it to times that might be good to buy or sell our crypto. So, if you're new to my channel, I try to simplify investing in stocks or cryptocurrencies in as much of a way as possible. I have an extensive background in the field of psychology, and I've been able to use that psychology when investing to my benefit. So, just trying to pass along some helpful information to you guys. And I think one of the best ways that I can do that is with fear and greed. So many times when there's fear and doubt in the market, people are staying out of the markets or they're selling because they're really worried when that's the time we need to be buying. So I try to look at some indicators and ways to see whether it's a smarter time to buy, if you can get better value out of an investment. And first of all, before we even talk about investing into stocks or crypto, my personal rule of thumb is it has to be an asset I like and use. Now, with crypto, that's not as possible, but make sure you do your own research and that it is something that you like and you believe in. That way, if the prices do go down and fear is building, then you get more excited about jumping on opportunities to buy so you can maximize your value. Anyways, this chart, this fear and greed index that I have pulled up here, as you can see, the earliest dates we have here are in early February. And as you can see here in early February, overall, we're creating lower highs in greed and getting down to fear. So if you weren't around for crypto back then, I'll tell you exactly what was happening. Because I got into crypto in 2017. Boy, what a time that was. And after the first week in 2018, which was here, we just had these big red candles all the way down. Not for Bitcoin, but for the altcoins. So altcoins were a great place to make money, and they always are every 4 year cycle. This is what a 4 year cycle looks like. Things just go from crazy low to crazy high prices. Bitcoin doing a 10x or a 20x, altcoins doing a 50, 100 times multiplier. It's happened in here and in here, and I'm wondering how it's going to look this time around. Should we get another 4 year cycle? So, after Bitcoin topped here in, it looks like mid December, in the first week of January, and you can see the dates at the bottom here. In the first week of January is like January 8th is when there's a massive sell off in crypto. And anything you were left holding altcoin wise, maybe it shot up, did a 50x, and you were really liking your profits. All of a sudden, on that day, so much money exited the markets. People were selling left and right. And even if you made 50x on an altcoin up to here, you were quickly only profiting on a 10x. Again, nothing bad. However, this would have been a good time to sell. So, as we go back to our fear and greed indicator, sadly, we don't have anything from before then. But you can see here we were getting into max fear. Now, one area I was curious about is what things looked like down here. Now, again, we have to take a look at the dates down here. So this is around mid-November to March. Mid-November of 2018 to March of 19. What was fear and greed doing back then? So as you can see, this is probably where we got up to a little bit above neutral fear greed value before we tanked. And this was that true bottom in Bitcoin. And then we slowly grinded up into March. Now, where were we in March? As you can see, in March, we started to get to the neutral and even greed levels a little bit. So this is back here. And I mean, look at that. Bitcoin, it was as high as pretty much 20,000. was hovering around 6,300, 6,400 for a little bit, fell off to the low 3,000s and was slowly grinding up. So, right there, even though we weren't back to the prices we were before, even by March, we were already getting into greed. People are starting to feel better about it. Now, where we were here in late June of 2019 is where we are right here. That's when we had a mid cycle top. So for now, we have a 1-to-1 correlation at this point with fear and greed. We had high greed, and that was peak price. Down here, when crypto tanked, fear matched the price. When the price tanked, so did fear. However, this started to turn into a leading indicator. And that brings me to my next point on how to read fear and greed is when we are in a bear market, when the trend of a price is going down. So we spend all this time running up here, and there's a correction that's due. A correction's coming, big sell off. When we are in a bear market where we are creating lower lows and selling off, when we get greed that spikes up in these moments, it can be a little bit deceiving. And I'm not suggesting buying the fear when we're still getting spikes of greed on the way down. As you can see, once the spikes of greed completed to down here, that was a good time to buy. But overall, the greed kept trending lower. As greedy as people wanted to be, we had one little spike up here. That was late November. One little spike, late November. I'm sure there was some possible fake out price action back here. I have it on the weekly, and all of a sudden we sold off. So it can be somewhat of a leading indicator. Beware of fear and greed, especially when we're in a down market. Alternatively, we've been in an uptrend. And so when we are in an uptrend, these pullbacks tend to be met with greed coming down to fear. And some of these pullbacks that we've seen here, I've talked about before, have been around 20% pullbacks each of these times. We've had about 4 of those. So all those dips in fear and greed that you've seen have been when crypto has had about these 20% pullbacks. Right here we can see that was mid-February of 2024, and I already know where that's going to be. I know it's not lined up perfectly. Yeah, right here it's saying it's up here, but here, let's maybe zoom out a little bit. So here we had, where's mid-February? Mid-February, we were coming back up again. And right here it's showing that we had peak fear after the ETF sell-off. This was the buy the rumor, sell the news ETF approval. And over here, when we sold off from the ETF, that's when we had peak fear, at least recently. So let's click off of that. So this is going by the week. I hope you can see the date at the bottom. So that does line up. That does line up with late January. Late January. All right. We got that sorted out. So after that mid-cycle top, let's go back. I just wanted to show you how, depending on the trend, you don't always want to buy fear when we're in a downtrend. Whereas when we're in an uptrend and you're looking for a pullback, sometimes the fear can help you. So we had the Bitcoin high from that 4-year cycle, again, the high, and then we had the low. And then we chopped around before shooting up. So this was the mid-cycle top. Again, high, low. We had the mid-cycle top where we had, look how high greed got. It got to a level of, I know it's having a hard time locating. Got to a level right there, it's saying 92. We got up to 95 there if I was able to zoom in even more. Up to 95. And as you can see, we tanked back down into these extreme levels of fear. Now, most of you will know what was happening in March of 2020. All the markets were selling off. Doesn't matter if it was crypto or stocks. That's what all this business is all about. So everything was selling off. I did think it was curious how we had this trend line, and I was wondering if this trend line would eventually connect somewhere down the road. It didn't. Drew that way back when, but as you can see on the fear and greed, if you look at the depths of the greed, does this match up? Excuse me. Does this match up with the price levels? Absolutely not. We're up here. We're having equal amounts of greed. However, we are now in a macro uptrend. Yes, we were, after we ran up for 6 months, we were creating lower lows, and then we formed this V bottom reversal before creating higher lows and eventually coming up. But overall, we were accumulating in here for a year and going back up. We ran up so hard, we needed another little mini correction. Kind of like this big move here in 2017. Ran up so hard, had a big correction. Ran up hard, not the same level of move by any stretch, but we had a correction. And without COVID, probably weren't going to get under this 786 fib line of 6,600. But this happened with markets everywhere. And I can show you that in the S&P. It's right there. So this happened with markets everywhere. As you can see here in 2018, when we had that deep correction we got down here, COVID blasted down through that. And the only time we've touched that lower channel was Great Financial Crisis. Now this trend line that has been the lows, we've been touching a few times recently. Now we've gone up above the 50 in that channel. But yeah, that's for another video. So anyways, going back to fear and greed. So fear and greed, you can see after we got to peak greed, things started chopping down and everything got crushed. And right now we were having a lot of fear. Now, this was a good time to buy. If you didn't catch this bottom, as we were chopping around down here between these two fib levels, we had a year. That was a great time to buy, whether you're buying up here, down here. If you're looking at a time to dollar cost average in, if you just took the high and low and saw that, you know what, we got up to the 382. Okay, we confirmed ourselves as bullish. We were staying above the 618 till we got under it, and then it was looking pretty bad for a while. However, excuse me, even when the COVID crash happened, it was still a higher low from the previous one. So right there, even though this sucks, that is still macro bullish. And so in this whole time, you could have bought and dollar cost averaged in. We created a higher low. Even if you're waiting for COVID, after that, look at this. We didn't really get under this 40 level in fear until that was May, late May of 2021. Well, what was going on in late May? If I had to guess, it'd be in here. Yep. Late May is when we sold off. So we ran up into all-time highs, and then we sold off. And I'm sure in here people were thinking, this is it for Bitcoin. Just like the last 4-year cycle bull run, we're about to have a massive sell-off again. However, we rallied and created the cycle top over here in November. Now let's take a look at where greed was in mid-April of 21 and early November of 21. You might be surprised by this. So mid-April of 21 is right here, not at the peak of greed, but it's down right here. So this became somewhat of a leading indicator. And I think part of the reason for that is we were getting into all-time high territory, or we were in all-time high territory. And then November of 21, early November, that was here. And I've noted our greed has not been this high since the very top of Bitcoin back here. But what's this all about? Why is August of 2020 important? Why did we have that spike in greed in August of 2020? What was going on? Well, as you can see here in August, something important happened on the fib lines. Here we were creating lower lows. COVID crash happened, but overall we created a higher low. In August, we got above that 0.5 fib. We created a higher low here and got above the 0.5 fib here. So within a matter of months, about half a year, we went from around 6,500 to close to 13,000. So that's a 2x in price in 6 months. You can imagine that if you were in crypto back at this time, maybe you're feeling good about Bitcoin and it's slowly chopping around. Yes, it gets down to this high 6,000 level, got up to 13, high 6,000. You see it come back up. You're thinking, okay, maybe we're just an accumulation, and then boom, we tank. This is just peak fear right here, as I showed you before. But then within the span of 6 months, you double the price. Yeah, you're going to go up really high in greed. And then when we reached peak greed back here, that was late November, early December. What was going on late November, early December? Well, that's when we busted through previous all-time highs. Late November, early December is when we finally broke the previous all-time highs all the way back here in December of 17. Late November, early December of 2020, 3 years later, we were getting at peak max greed because we're in an all-time high region. And so knowing that now and where we are here, we've had fear and greed get up as high as 79, 80. Let's just say 80 for simplicity's sakes. I know it's 79, but we're at about 80. What would take us to these 90s, these levels in the 90s, 90, 95? To me, that would be crypto, Bitcoin, creating new all-time highs, just like it did back here. Back here, when we made new all-time highs, that's when we finally broke through. Over here, this was just being very bullish. We made a 2x inside of 6 months. And I think you could take either of these scenarios and apply them to where we are right now. Now, this time is different because after the macro bottom of that 4-year cycle, so after this 4-year cycle, when we had that bottom, this is where we got up to 95 on the greed. And as you can see here from our bottom, it's taken a year of going up. And so maybe you're thinking, well, maybe this is more like 2017, how we're just kind of chopping sideways before getting ready to go up. Maybe. So we went up very fast, and I think that's what can spike greed even higher, is not just the level of the move, but the pace of the move. If we're going up from these levels here, 3,500 to 14,000, doing a 4x inside of 6 months, yeah, you're going to have super high greed. But that was kind of a fake out. Here, it's been more steady. Now, something else to note is just looking at this chart here, where do you think the low for Bitcoin was? Our last cycle low. Without looking at the dates too much, when we were here, where do you think it is on the Fear and Greed Index? I'm sure you're probably thinking it's down here, correct? Well, let's take a look. Where were we in June of 2022? This might surprise you. June of 2022 is when we had this massive sell-off right here. Now, would this have been a good time to buy? Yeah. However, it would have been a difficult time to buy because a couple of reasons. One, we have this massive sell-off and we have not created higher lows macro-wise. We ran up. We knew a correction was coming. People were thinking there's going to be a head and shoulders, and boom, we just sold off. So people are probably waiting for higher lows in the market structure. And overall, there were higher lows. I remember people getting very bullish in here. The other thing is that when the price wicked down, I remember this surprised a lot of people. You see where the upper end of this fib line is on the left? Well, that's from the prior cycle highs. And even when we made lows from this cycle high, you notice that low is above any cycle high we have back here. So here was the low. Our last cycle high did not reach those lows. Same thing here. We had those lows. Our lows were above the cycle before it, the high. This was the first time that a low went under the previous cycle top. And that's probably going to happen again should we get another 4-year cycle. You can see this move here all the way to the very bottom, 15.5 to around 20,000. So $5,000 difference is where we went from the prior cycle highs to the lows. But this was not the low, all because this is where we were. The real low in early November of 2022, this was the FTX bankruptcy, Sam Bankman-Fried, all that stuff. We were creating higher lows in the fear and greed. And so in a way, this was a leading indicator. We've either had one-to-one correlation where this is peak greed and that was peak price. That's peak fear. That was peak low price of that cycle. Peak fear, peak low price. Here we had peak greed. That was because we got into new all-time highs. However, when we were bullish, that was not the top. The top, the best time to sell was really in here when we went down a little bit. Not here. Man, what a short window that was. Right after fear and greed, when it was next time it studied out, that was the time to sell. Now, if any of you did not sell and you're able to wait and get lucky, sure. Maybe you sold some in November. And there were a good handful of altcoins that still ran up a bit more here. However, I'm telling you, as someone who was in this last bull run, all the damage was done here. And if you would have gotten in anywhere in here on some of your altcoins, you were more than happy to sell here. Now, sure, could you have gotten another 2x by here? Yeah, but would you have wanted to wait through that, banking on the price of Bitcoin coming back up? Not everyone has the psychology for that. And even for myself, I would not care to put myself through that. When we're making new all-time highs and we're just aping up, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with selling as we get up here and just letting the rest play out. A lot of people couldn't do that. Market put them in a spin cycle, and a lot of people got wrecked. I remember so many people being bullish over here because we were matching these lows, and we're gonna We're going to make a head and shoulders pattern. So we have one more loop up. Nope. Tank. Or other people are saying, well, Bitcoin has a lot of value and it's going to retrace into alts. Nope. I can show you that with Bitcoin dominance. After Bitcoin dominance, and this is the percent of the crypto market that's in Bitcoin, when Bitcoin dominance tanks, that's the time to get out. And even when it's hopping up and down, look, we never got lower. Here, Bitcoin dominance tanked. That was the time to get out. You can see the date on the bottom, early January, early May. Those are the times to get out. Sure, maybe you waited till November 21. Where was that? Right in here. When dominance tanks to the low 40s, get out. And we may be setting up for another repeat of that. Now, I do wonder if dominance is only going to go to the mid-low 40s, because as you can see, here's where the low was. Here's where that low was. So already, if we draw a trend line, trend lines upon trend lines, where would that put us? Maybe dominance is only going down to the mid 40s. I don't know. Just something to think about. Let's get back on task. Fear and greed. There's my squirrel brain for you. So we had one-to-one correlations. We had a leading indicator correlation, a leading indicator correlation. Have we had any sort of lagging indicator correlation where greed dipped to fear prematurely? Maybe you could say over here that fear went too high into the markets. Again, I think what you also have to consider is the severity of the move. When we're at new all-time highs, we're at 65,000, and we dip down to 30,000 and Bitcoin gets cut in half, yes, people are going to believe a big sell-off's happening. That was a 50% retracement from the top. So when that happens, you can understand why fear is in the markets. But I guess you can say that could have been a leading indicator more than a lagging one. I'm not sure if I really spot any lagging indicators. If you do, comment those below. I do see one-to-one indicators where we're at a high, we ran up real fast, and then sometimes we're at a low. And even when we create new all-time highs, that does not mean that's the peak of price. So here's where I want to leave off today. We are on the edge of greed and extreme greed. We're at 80. What could bring us up to 95? Well, you guys know what that is. That's this right here. I do not think we're going to get a spike up here of around 95 without making an all-time high. That's my guess. If we're only at 79.80 and we have a whole nother fib range to go, then I don't believe we're getting there quite yet. Now, as we zoom in here, what do you guys notice? We are up near 56,000. That just literally happened today. So we're up near the very last fib line here of around 56,000. So I'm sure the fear and greed index is going to adjust tomorrow. We're probably going to get into the low 80s, low to mid 80s pretty soon. What's going to take us to the high 80s, the 90s, is getting through all this and into all-time highs. That's where I believe we're going to get in those 90s. Now, right here, I think this is a key level where Bitcoin is at right now. Because something I've noted is that each of the last cycles, we move up in the fib range. Let me auto adjust this. After the high and low, the peak here was 3 months before, under the 0.5. After the high and the low, the peak of the price before the halving was 1 month before, above the 0.5. After the high and the low, the peak was 11 months before, above the next fib line up to 382. So we've had 3 months, 1 month, 11 months. We keep going higher in our fibs. This time, our next fib is the 236. And we are within 2 months of the halving. So because the peak of the price has been that close to the halving before, this does not surprise me that it's been this way again. That's 3 out of 4 times. Are we going to get above 56? I think this fib line, the 56181, is going to be very key. And should we create new all-time highs before the halving, that's going to be very different for the crypto market. We'll have to adjust our viewpoint and be able to react to it when that happens. So my thought has been that we're going to get somewhere around this 56. The halving would be a sell the news event, and then we'd eventually go back up into all-time highs, and off we go. Doesn't mean it has to happen, and I'm more than happy to be wrong. I have money in the markets. So if you're looking at fear and greed and wondering when the heck, I've listened to you talk for 30 minutes, when the heck is it going to be time for me to buy? Well, we've had 4 times since the bottom where we had those 20% moves. We've had 4 times, here, 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 and here. We have not had another since then. And something I've noticed, and others online have noticed this as well, is that when Bitcoin is in a bull trend, if it gets to the longer moving averages and hits it, goes under it, we tend to have the healthy corrections and go up. However, when we don't hit it and we keep going up, when we move down trying to hit that longer moving average, we tend to come back to it. And we only really have 2 times that's happened before. This time in here, we had a mini correction. We were in such a bull move, but we got back there. We got back there. We didn't get to the moving averages, but we got back there 112, 150 days later. We'll map that out. And then back here, we almost corrected, but then we didn't get back there until 130. So right in there, right in that range, about 130 days later. Where's 100? Let's just say 130 days later from now. That would put us at around June. So that's after the halving. The halving's in April. I am curious to see how high we're going to go up and if we're going to have a correction and come back down to this 39,000 level sometime around June. Again, doesn't have to happen, but that has happened before. This time is different. We have Bitcoin ETFs and God knows what's going to happen. So as far as next corrections, I do think eventually when we do get a correction, it's going to be a bigger one. Here we've had 20% corrections each of these times. The next one, whenever it does happen, I think might be a doozy. That's my prediction. Doesn't mean it has to happen. And I think if, just going back to fear and greed to put a bow on everything, if we do stop at 56, we're probably going to be at around this 85 level. And if we sell into the halving and go down to 39,000, well, you can imagine whether we're at 56 or heck, even let's say we get a wick up to somewhere like 62, maybe in the middle of this range. Maybe we close out at 56, but we wick up here. If we go from 62 to 39, you can imagine what fear and greed is going to do. It's going to go from 85, and we're going to go back down here under 40. I can almost guarantee that. And we can measure that out. What percent of a move would that be if we went from 56 to 39? So that would be about a 30% correction. Or let's say we wick up around 62. We could get near a 40% correction. If that happens, I could see fear really hitting the market hard. And then who knows? From there, do we continue in this pretty steep uptrend, or do we slowly start to grind down and get another higher macro higher low, kind of like we did back here? We'll see. But one thing's for sure, this time is different. Fear and greed, it can help you know when to get into markets. As long as we're in this macro bull trend, until we break all-time highs, when we get those spikes down into fear, I like those moments to buy. When we are getting those 20% drops, that's when I'm checking my altcoins and I'm taking a look at dollar cost averaging in. As soon as we break into all-time high region, I'm not buying anything crypto. I don't care how high it goes, whether it's a fake out, which we've never had before, or whether we're just going to get a big fat green candle and go parabolic. As soon as we're in all-time high region, I'm done. And overall, for most alts, I think that'll be the case too. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video on fear and greed. I know I said the word fear and greed probably 200 times. So if you're playing a drinking game, I apologize for getting you drunk on a Monday. But just wanted to show you that, how fear and greed can even mess with you a little bit. And really, the more important part here is not just looking at the levels of it, but where's the trend going? When the trend's going down, you don't want to simply buy these greed dumps. When it is going up and we get these dumps, then you have confirmation. We're making higher lows. We're turning bullish. Volume's coming back in. And then after we're going up, when we get these massive corrections, those can be great times to buy. And then this was a leading indicator. That's where the true top was not too long after that. So if we do get into this high 90s and you want to wait just a little bit, again, we have other ways to look at what the top is. Bitcoin dominance tanking is one of those indicators. This was a leading indicator of things to come. But again, we went from 65 to 30,000. This was the true top in Bitcoin, and it wasn't even peak greed. People, as here you can see, we were creating a lower high, and then boom, we fell off. Here was a leading indicator. The true bottom was up here. But then you can notice, well, hey, we're creating higher lows. Now it's a leading indicator of the next bull trend that's coming. So take from all that what you will. I hope you guys found this video useful. Wanted to do something different than just purely looking at a certain asset and its fib levels. I know we only looked at Bitcoin today, but just how you can take the fear and greed concept and how you can apply it. So have a happy Monday, guys. Hope your week goes well, and take care. Bye-bye.